The afternoon squall sweeping off the northern coastline turned the white gravel walkways of the Gallagher estate into a slick field of dark mud, right as the quartet began playing the wedding march. Underneath the crystal marquee tents that housed 300 of the city's most affluent corporate executives and social elites, I walked quietly alongside my wife, Diane. For 30 years, I had navigated the brutal world of global maritime logistics and commercial port engineering, building a shipping network that spanned the Pacific Rim while keeping my family life deliberately modest. Beside me, Diane wore a silver silk dress she had spent 4 months drafting, cutting, and hand-stitching specifically for the wedding of our only son, Aaron. Every delicate seam in silver thread carried a mother's devotion, an offering of love from a woman who had sacrificed her own comforts for 25 years to ensure her boy could attend private academies without carrying a single dollar of debt. A sudden gust of coastal wind caught the hem of Diane's coat right past the VIP cordon, causing her heel to slip on the wet gravel. Before I could catch her arm, she lost her footing and fell sideways onto the saturated path, the pristine silver fabric of her handmade gown sinking directly into the dark, churning mud. Instead of helping his mother up, our new daughter-in-law, Brittany Gallagher, the pampered heir to Gallagher Imports, wearing an $80,000 ivory lace gown, stopped dead in her tracks and sneered down with disdain. Brittany brushed the edge of her lace train, turned toward the private security personnel near the archway, and spoke in a sharp, commanding tone. "Look who is dragging their filth across my bridal aisle. Where are the venue coordinators? Why are middle-level warehouse laborers wandering inside the VIP seating area without escort?" Aaron stepped out from behind the pillars, wrapped an arm around Brittany's waist, and stared down at his fallen mother with eyes as cold as polished glass. Before we proceed deeper into how a veteran shipping founder dismantled his own son's house of cards, where are you tuning in from today? Leave your city and state in the comments below, so we can officially welcome you to our community of truth seekers and structural justice enthusiasts. While this narrative explores the painful intersection of family betrayal and financial accountability, the core lessons regarding boundaries, legal protection, and self-respect are universal truths applicable to every parent building a legacy today. If you have ever felt taken for granted or disrespected by the very people whose foundations you poured with your own sweat, hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another real-life lesson in integrity and consequences. Now let us return to the exact moment when Aaron decided to trade his birthright for a seat at the Gallagher family table. There was no trace of concern on Aaron's face as he looked down at Diane, struggling to lift her mud-soaked skirt from the gravel. He adjusted his custom tuxedo jacket and spoke with deliberate loudness designed to echo across the front row of high society guests. "Mom, I told you weeks ago not to wear that cheap, homemade outfit to my ceremony. You just ruined our professional wedding photographs in front of 300 business leaders." The elite crowd beneath the crystal tent fell into a sharp silence before a wave of condescending whispers rippled through the aisles. They looked at us as if we were pathetic burdens clinging to the coattails of a rising corporate star who had married into nobility. I felt the measured beat of my pulse slow to an icy crawl. Anger is a cheap, undisciplined emotion that clouds strategic judgment. I stepped forward, placed my hands gently under Diane's arms, lifted her to her feet, and used my clean linen pocket square to wipe the dark mud off her cheek. Yet Aaron was determined to push past the absolute limit of paternal endurance. He looked at me with open defiance, reached inside the breast pocket of his designer jacket, and pulled out a sleek leather checkbook alongside a gold pen. With gestures meant to impress his father-in-law, Vincent Gallagher, Aaron scribbled a figure across the paper, tore the check from the binding, and tossed it into the air. The check fluttered down through the humid breeze before landing squarely in the dark, muddy puddle directly between my leather boots. Aaron smirked, leaning his weight against Brittany's shoulder. "Dad, there is a check for $150,000. Consider it a severance bonus and a thank you gift for raising me and paying my college tuition. Pick it up out of the dirt, take Mom out of here right now, and never come back to embarrass my new family again." Our worlds do not mix anymore. In that exact second, The fundamental truth crystallized before my eyes. The boy I had raised had sold his moral character to purchase a hollow mask of vanity. Without a single word of protest, I bent my knees, reached down into the wet gravel, and picked up the mud-splattered paper containing Aaron's signature. I stood up slowly, brushed the loose dirt from the edge of the check, and walked with steady strides down the center aisle toward the primary stage at the front of the marquee. The 300 guests held their breath, anticipating that an aging middle manager was about to approach the microphone to weep or plead for family reconciliation. I mounted the 3 wooden steps, stepped behind the master podium, and tapped the microphone twice to verify that the sound system was broadcasting across the estate. I raised the $150,000 check high above my head, turning it slowly under the bright stage spotlights, so that Aaron, Brittany, and Vincent Gallagher could see every inch of their muddy bribe clearly. Looking straight into Aaron's widened eyes, from the podium, I gripped both ends of the heavy bank paper between my thumbs and forefingers and ripped it cleanly across the center. The sharp sound of tearing paper echoed through the high-output stadium speakers mounted around the perimeter of the lawn, silencing the whispers in the marquee. I aligned the torn halves together, ripped them across the grain a second time, and opened my fingers, allowing the 4 ruined fragments to drift down onto the hardwood stage like autumn leaves. I stepped away from the podium, without a single syllable of explanation to the assembly, walked back down the steps, and wrapped my arm firmly around Diane's shoulders to lead her toward the exit gates. As we moved past the rows of white chairs like 2 ghosts departing a banquet of kings, Aaron shouted furiously from the rear lawn, "You are going to regret this every day of your life. Dad, you are a penniless nobody without my money and my connections." I did not turn my head. I simply smiled into the falling rain. Before we could reach our parked sedan beyond the outer gates, Vincent Gallagher marched up to the stage podium and snatched the microphone from the master of ceremonies. "Warren Sterling, what in the world do you think you are doing?" Vincent bellowed across the lawn, pointing a thick finger toward my back. "This is the most important social event of the decade for Gallagher Imports. If you do not possess the basic breeding to behave like a civilized human being, get off my property immediately. Our corporate syndicate has zero tolerance for lower-class ingrates." Aaron hurried onto the stage, alongside his father-in-law, standing tall beneath the spotlights as he took the secondary microphone. "Did you hear what Vincent just told you, Dad? I offered you a dignified exit out of the gutter, and you chose to throw it away. Starting tomorrow morning, I officially assume the title of Senior Strategic Partner at Gallagher Imports, controlling global supply routes and financial assets you could not earn in 10 lifetimes of warehouse shifts." Thunderous applause erupted from the 300 elite guests below the stage, all of them raising their champagne flutes to toast Aaron, while casting scornful looks in our direction. I paused at the perimeter gate, turned slowly, and looked back across the wet lawn toward the stage where my son stood basking in false glory. My gaze locked onto the platinum wedding band on Aaron's finger, a ring purchased with funds whose origins I already suspected were tainted by dark financial manipulation. I looked straight into Vincent Gallagher's triumphant sneer and spoke in a measured tone that carried clearly to the front row tables. "Celebrate with everything you have tonight, Aaron. Because when the sun rises over the harbor tomorrow morning, this will be the last night you or Vincent Gallagher will ever live as wealthy men." I opened the door of our 10-year-old sedan, settled Diane inside, and drove out through the stone gates. The old sedan glided smoothly through the rain-swept highway toward the industrial outskirts of the city, the squeak of the wipers cutting through the silence inside the cabin. Diane sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out at the blurred city lights, while her shoulders trembled with the emotional shock of seeing her only son cast her into the mud. I reached across the console, covered her ice-cold hand with my own, and kept my focus fixed on the wet asphalt ahead without offering empty platitudes or hollow promises of comfort. True wealth and real power never require loud declarations or theatrical checks. They exist in silent, immovable structural authority, capable of reshaping reality with a single command. Aaron and Vincent Gallagher operated under the fatal assumption that I was a retiring, mid-level logistics supervisor, surviving on a modest monthly salary just to make ends meet. They had no idea that for 30 years I had operated under the corporate structure of Sterling Global Holdings, the private equity and maritime infrastructure syndicate that owned 70% of the shipping terminals, automated storage warehouses, and freight lifelines upon which Gallagher Imports relied. After walking Diane up to our master bedroom at our suburban compound and tucking a wool blanket around her shoulders until her breathing steadied, I stepped down the hallway into my fortified home office. I locked the solid oak door behind me, sat down at my custom walnut workstation, and powered on my triple-screen encrypted administrative console, watching the blue LED glow illuminate my cold, focused face. It was time to drop the gentle mask of the patient father and assume the full operational authority of the man who controlled the regional supply chain. I opened the master financial surveillance ledger for Gallagher Imports, scanning through the dense arrays of corporate balance sheets and rolling credit liabilities that filled the central monitor. Within 10 minutes of deep balance sheet analysis, the truth behind Vincent Gallagher's lavish displays became glaringly obvious. His syndicate was drowning in massive, high-interest debt, facing imminent insolvency across all shipping routes. He had brought Aaron into the executive partnership purely to leverage my personal surety bonds and Aaron's clean credit profile to attract fresh commercial loans. I picked up my encrypted satellite phone and pressed the shortcut for Pierce Vance, the senior general counsel and managing director of Sterling Global's legal division, who had stood as my closest confidant for 22 years. The line clicked open after a single ring, but instead of his customary calm greeting, Pierce's voice vibrated with intense professional outrage. "Warren, I just completed the special forensic audit on Gallagher Imports and pulled the real-time title records for your personal family holdings right before the wedding. You need to look at the secondary display right now. Aaron's actions go far beyond simple arrogance or corporate ambition. What he did while Diane was in the hospital 3 months ago is clinical financial treason." My grip tightened around the leather casing of the satellite handset until my knuckles turned white, yet my voice remained level and absolute. "Read the official findings into the secure log. Pierce, give me the exact timestamps and instruments." Pierce took a heavy breath and began reading directly from the county logs. 3 months ago, when Diane suffered that severe concussion after her car accident and spent 14 days recovering in the neurology ICU, Aaron visited her bedside every afternoon. We all assumed he was acting out of deep filial concern, but the surveillance and notary logs proved the exact opposite. Aaron brought a commercial legal binder into the ICU during the windows, when her heavy pain medication made her drift in and out of consciousness, guiding her trembling hand to sign and fingerprint a comprehensive, unrestricted master power of attorney. Using that fraudulently obtained document, Aaron immediately executed a covert quitclaim deed, transferring total legal ownership of your suburban residence entirely into his own personal name. Last Tuesday, he pledged that title as collateral to secure a $2.5 million commercial line of credit from Gallagher's primary merchant bank, using the cash to purchase Brittany's 5-carat diamond ring and fund the wedding deposits. Hearing how my son had exploited his mother's vulnerable medical state to strip us of our home extinguished the last flicker of paternal hesitation in my chest. This was not merely the ingratitude of a spoiled child. It was premeditated elder financial fraud executed with precision to buy admission into a corrupt corporate dynasty. I looked at the framed family photograph resting on my walnut desk taken 10 years ago, during a fishing trip, when Aaron still looked at me with honest respect, and felt my connection to him freeze into solid iron. "Aaron and Vincent believe they have locked down the perfect asset play," I said quietly into the mouthpiece, watching the digital clock on my wall transition to 2 o'clock in the morning. "They are assuming that because the power of attorney was recorded and the bank funds were disbursed, the transaction is set in stone and I am just an old bricklayer who will quietly move into a rental apartment when the foreclosure papers arrive. They forgot who designed the structural financing of that residential property 15 years ago and embedded the exact legal safeguards into the foundation." I entered my master combination into the wall safe beside the bookshelf, opened the steel door, and pulled out the original property deed and trust covenants I had recorded when I purchased the land. Pierce, I instructed, tracing my finger across Section 18A of the Master Trust Instrument. When I financed our residential estate 15 years ago, I funded the mortgage entirely through Sterling Global's private credit subsidiary, using a specialized structural balloon note. That instrument contains an explicit acceleration clause specifying that if any unauthorized title transfer or encumbrance occurs without the direct written authorization of the primary corporate guarantor Warren Sterling, the entire remaining principal, along with 15 years of compound penalties, becomes due immediately. By executing that fraudulent transfer and pledging the home to Gallagher's merchant bank, Aaron has triggered a total default. Transmit the formal Section 18, a accelerated demand notice to Gallagher's banking syndicate and Aaron's personal accounts before sunrise. The full $2.5 million balance is due within 48 hours. Pierce chuckled softly over the encrypted line, the dry sound of a master litigator, preparing to drop a structural hammer on an unprotected target. Gallagher Imports and Aaron do not have $200,000 in liquid cash between them right now, let alone $2.5 million, Warren. When this acceleration notice hits the clearinghouse at dawn, the merchant bank will instantly freeze every secondary account tied to their names to cover their liability exposures. That is precisely the objective, Pierce, I replied, opening my secondary administrative dashboard on the third monitor. It is time to initiate Phase 2 of the clearance operation across international waters. It is currently 3 o'clock in the morning here, which means it is a bright, sunlit afternoon on the private island of Bora Bora, where Aaron and Brittany have just checked into their luxury overwater bungalow for their 2-week honeymoon. I just pulled up the real-time telemetry on Aaron's high-limit supplemental platinum card, the account tied directly to my corporate executive profile that he has been using for 8 years to finance his lavish personal travel. I am locking the account, revoking the authorization lines, and transmitting an emergency international fraud retrieval code directly to the Bora Bora Resort Management server right now. Halfway across the Pacific Ocean, bathed in tropical sunlight, Aaron and Brittany were lounging on the private teak deck of a $5,000 a night overwater bungalow overlooking the turquoise lagoon of Bora Bora. Their illusion of untouchable paradise shattered abruptly when the resort's general manager, accompanied by 2 uniformed security officers, walked out along the wooden jetty and stopped at the edge of their deck. The manager bowed with cold politeness, held out a printed satellite billing terminal receipt, and informed Aaron that their initial accommodation deposit and luxury excursion charges had returned a mandatory international fraud decline from the issuing banking authority. Aaron leapt off his chaise lounge, waving his black platinum card, while Brittany demanded to see the regional director. The general manager did not blink. He simply handed Aaron the official bank retrieval slip, displaying the warning text. Account permanently terminated. Suspected financial fraud. Says card immediately, Mr. Becker, the manager said in a firm tone. Under international banking regulations and our resort security protocols, your reservation is canceled with immediate effect. You and your wife are ordered to pack your personal belongings and vacate this bungalow within 30 minutes, after which our security staff will escort you to the public ferry terminal or contact municipal police for theft of services. Panic replaced Brittany's arrogance as she watched 2 security officers step onto the deck, her eyes darting toward Aaron with intense suspicion as she demanded to know why his funds were frozen. Desperate to maintain control, Aaron grabbed his smartphone with trembling fingers, walked to the far corner of the teak deck away from the staff, and dialed my personal direct line number, convinced that his father would immediately fix his financial embarrassment. Inside my dark home office 5,000 miles away, the satellite terminal chimed on my desk. I pressed the answer key while simultaneously activating the digital evidentiary recording system, capturing Aaron's voice through the speaker. Dad, what the hell is going on with my supplemental platinum card? I am sitting on the dock in Bora Bora, and the resort staff is trying to throw Brittany and me into the street like common vagrants. Call the bank server right now and unlock my account before you ruin my honeymoon. I leaned back into my leather chair, staring at the digital audio waveform on my monitor, as I spoke in a voice as cold and heavy as ocean ice. "That supplemental card is registered under my primary corporate identification, Aaron. I possess absolute legal authority to terminate it at any second of my choosing. Furthermore, you made your position abundantly clear 4 hours ago when you threw a $150,000 check into the mud in front of 300 witnesses and declared that you no longer needed my support or my presence in your life." Aaron completely lost his temper over the satellite connection, his voice rising into a hysterical shout that echoed through his bungalow deck. "Stop being such a jealous, bitter old man, Dad. I only did what was necessary to secure my position with the Gallagher dynasty. Do you know how hard I had to work to get Mom to sign that power of attorney in the ICU? She was so drugged up on painkillers she barely knew what city she was in. All I had to do was point my pen at the signature line, and she signed away the house without reading a single paragraph. If I hadn't mortgaged your house for $2.5 million, I never could have paid for Brittany's wedding ring or bought my partnership seat. Are you really going to destroy your own son's future just over some mud on Mom's dress?" Every word of Aaron's cold-blooded confession admitting to exploiting his drugged mother in the ICU to commit real estate wire fraud was captured with crystal clarity on my secure server. You made your choice when you traded your mother's dignity and your family's home for Vincent Gallagher's approval. "Aaron," I said calmly into the microphone before tapping the red termination icon and saving the audio file to the evidentiary drive. While Aaron sat stranded and penniless on a tropical island half a world away, the second phase of the structural demolition struck Vincent Gallagher at the center of his power. At 6 o'clock in the morning, under a cold rain, Vincent arrived at the executive headquarters of Gallagher Imports in downtown Seattle, eager to review the commercial credit lines he believed Aaron's partnerships had secured. He had barely placed his monogrammed briefcase onto his desk when his private intercom buzzed frantically with a call from his chief logistics director. "Stationed at the primary harbor terminal. Mr. Gallagher, you need to get down to Terminal 4 right now. Federal maritime enforcement agents and commercial compliance auditors have locked down our shipping gates with yellow tape and served emergency seizure warrants across every container in our inventory." Vincent sprinted out of his office, jumped into his limousine, and raced down the wet waterfront corridor to Terminal 4, where 36 federal customs inspectors and auditors were inspecting manifests while armed port security blocked the loading cranes. Vincent stumbled out of his car and confronted the lead enforcement officer. "What is the meaning of this illegal seizure? Gallagher Imports is a fully certified commercial importer. You have zero legal grounds to freeze my cargo." The lead officer stared at him without emotion and handed him a formal judicial enforcement order. "We are operating under direct compliance mandates issued by the primary property owner of Terminal 4 and the holding syndicate that underwrites your maritime freight bonds. Mr. Gallagher, your commercial warehouse lease has been terminated for covenant violations, and your supply chain bonds have been revoked due to an accelerated Section 18A default notice against your primary financial guarantor. The master lessor of the terminal and controlling chairman of Sterling Global Holdings across the signature line is Warren Sterling." Vincent's knees buckled, staggering back against the wet fender of his limousine as the reality hit him. The unassuming man he had publicly humiliated 24 hours ago masterminded the shipping empire that kept Gallagher Imports alive. Right then, his cellular phone rang with a hysterical call from Aaron in Bora Bora, screaming that their resort accounts were frozen and a $2.5 million foreclosure demand had hit their personal email. Roaring into the phone with wild fury, Vincent cursed Aaron as an incompetent fool before ordering him and Brittany to board the first available economy flight back to Seattle so they could prostrate themselves before the chairman of Sterling Global Holdings and beg for mercy. 2 days later, under a heavy overcast sky, the private high-speed elevator of Sterling Tower ascended 50 stories to the executive penthouse boardroom. The polished oak double doors slid open to reveal Vincent Gallagher, Aaron, and Brittany entering the towering sanctuary that served as the nerve center of my corporate empire. All three of them looked pale, disheveled, and thoroughly exhausted from 48 hours of travel stress, with Brittany's designer shoes still carrying traces of the dried gravel mud she had refused to clean from her wedding day. They approached the center of the boardroom, where a tall, high-backed Italian leather armchair sat rotated toward the floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the harbor terminals below. Vincent stepped toward the desk, wringing his hands together, as his voice broke with desperate humility. "Mr. Chairman, we have come to beg your board for a temporary stay of execution on our terminal leases and the Section 18A acceleration note. Gallagher Imports will assign 70% our corporate equity to your syndicate and restructure our debt obligations under any terms you dictate if you will simply lift the harbor freeze and stop the residential foreclosure." The heavy leather armchair slowly rotated on its steel base, turning around to face the room. Sitting behind the executive mahogany desk, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, with my hands resting over the handle of my pen, I looked straight into their astonished eyes and spoke in a steady tone. "Welcome to my boardroom. Vincent, please sit down so we can examine your final liquidation ledger." Vincent froze in absolute terror. Brittany covered her mouth to stifle a scream, and Aaron collapsed onto his knees on the hardwood floor, staring at his father as if he were looking at a vengeful deity. "Dad, you are the chairman of Sterling Global Holdings?" Aaron stammered, tears springing into his bloodshot eyes as he crawled across the polished floor toward the edge of my desk. "Why did you let us live in a modest suburban house all those years if you owned the entire port syndicate? Please, Dad, you have to save me right now. The bank filed criminal fraud complaints regarding the ICU power of attorney, and if I don't pay the $2.5 million balloon balance by 5 o'clock today, they are going to issue federal arrest warrants. I am your only son." I looked down at the boy kneeling before my desk without a single trace of paternal warmth or hesitation. "Real wealth and genuine power always choose silence and integrity over loud vanity, Aaron," I said coldly, pressing the master playback key on my desk console. Instantly, the high-fidelity acoustic speakers surrounding the boardroom roared to life, broadcasting the exact audio recording of Aaron's phone call from Bora Bora across the room. His cruel, boastful words describing how he manipulated his drugged, disoriented mother in the hospital bed echoed off the glass walls, stripping away any possible defense or claim of misunderstanding. As the final words of Aaron's recorded confession faded into the silence of the boardroom, the double doors swung open a second time, and 4 armed federal maritime enforcement agents and commercial fraud investigators marched inside with handcuffs ready. The lead federal agent displayed his badge, unfolded a certified warrant, and read the charges with professional detachment. "Vincent Gallagher, you are under arrest for commercial wire fraud, customs misrepresentation, and supply chain conspiracy. Aaron Becker, you are under arrest for felony elder financial exploitation, bank wire fraud, and execution of forged instruments." The sharp, heavy snap of steel handcuffs locking around Aaron's and Vincent's wrists echoed through the executive boardroom like the closing of a vault door. Right as the federal agents lifted Aaron to his feet, the side entrance connecting to my private executive lounge opened, and Diane walked into the boardroom wearing a navy blue designer silk gown that exuded quiet dignity and strength. Seeing Diane standing beside my desk with absolute serenity, Brittany rushed forward across the floor, dropped to her knees, and grabbed Diane's silk skirt with trembling hands. "Mom, please save us. Tell your husband to call off the federal agents and stop the bank foreclosure. I know I acted terribly at the wedding, but we are family now. I will do anything you ask." Diane looked down at Brittany's mud-stained heels with calm, profound pity, gently stepping back to dislodge Brittany's fingers from her dress. "Do not call me Mom, Brittany," Diane spoke softly, yet every syllable carried the weight of pure steel. "The mud you forced me into on my dress was washed away in a single afternoon, but the moral rot inside your heart and my son's character will never wash clean." 3 months later, the federal court handed down a 12-year prison sentence to Aaron for elder financial exploitation and an 8-year sentence to Vincent for commercial fraud. Brittany lost her inheritance to bank liquidation, and while Diane and I sat on the porch of our peaceful countryside estate, overlooking the northern forests, we knew that cutting away a diseased branch was the only way to save the integrity of the family tree.